Hello, this is Mr. Phipps. I'm the U.S. history teacher for the global community. You'll probably be seeing some videos from me here early on as we prepare for this weird hybrid thing that we're doing for our opening of the school year. But no matter who you have, in this school you're in good hands if you're learning U.S. history. Mr. Gilpin, Mrs. Hare, Mrs. Considine will all take good care of you, and you'll learn a lot about U.S. history. So we're going to start off this year with a little bit of a review about geography. You might think, well, we had geography last year. Why do we have to start it this year? Because you need to know exactly how closely related geography and history are. In order to learn history and understand it fully, you need to know how geography plays a big role in that, and it does. So, without further ado, let's start talking about your first virtual assignments, shall we? So history is related very closely to geography because history is determined by geography. History is the story of mankind, and mankind relies on the geography of where they are in order to determine everything about their lives. Geography determines where people live, what they can eat, what they have to use to build with, what they have to wear, what they use to move around and move from one place to another, where they can live, period. I mean, there are places on this earth where people really can't live for very long. All of that stuff and more. So that's why we studied geography before we get into history, because it makes more sense when you understand why it's happening, where it is happening. We're going to start off this year in U.S. history talking about the age of exploration, when the European countries started to get involved in trying to grab a piece of the New World in the Americas, North and South America, and all that followed that. That's called the Columbian Exchange, named after Christopher Columbus, and geography was certainly involved in that, especially the resources that could be found here that were not easy to find back in Europe, and that led to a whole mess, literally a mess, that we're still dealing with today. So we're going to get into the details of all of that, but geography and U.S. history and world history are really closely linked. That's the point here. So, on to your assignments. The map that you see behind me now is Western Europe. And the reason it's up there is because that's where we're kind of going to start with our geography review, because America was born out of Western Europe. We have, of course, England, Great Britain. We have France that was involved, the Netherlands, back then it was called Holland, the French, France, Spain for sure, Italy, Portugal. All of these countries were heavily invested in trying to, as I said, get a piece of the Americas, the New World. It wasn't really a new world. It was just a world that Europe didn't know about yet. So that is important to know kind of where those places were in relation to one another, because what happens in Europe always had a direct impact on what happened in the United States, and still does to this day. So your first assignments are going to involve reviewing maps of the world. You're going to need to know how to color in and identify the continents and the oceans. You'll have a map that looks like that, and you're going to have to use your iPad, internet to find and label everything you need to label on that, and there will be a quiz about that where you'll have numbered map that looks just like your blank map there did, and you'll need to identify what those numbers are, what their names are. And then you're also going to have a map of Western Europe, and you're going to need to identify the most important countries that were involved with the formation of the United States. So the ones I mentioned, Germany, a couple of others that might be on there. So you're going to have to study the map of Western Europe and be familiar with what's what there. That's going to be one of your first assignments, and I'll show you a little bit more about how to do that in just a second. There are two types of maps that we're going to be using early on here in our geography review. One is a political map like you see behind me, and the other is a physical map. Political maps are used to show the boundaries between places like states or countries. They are, for the most part, man-made, drawn on a map, created by governments, sometimes through wars, sometimes through treaties, sometimes just agreed peacefully and settled peacefully. But they're the lines that aren't actually on the earth, of course. You don't go from Indiana into Ohio and see a line on the ground like you would on a map. I hope you realize that. But they're on maps to show that this is the dividing line. Now, a physical map shows what the earth actually looks like, what the land looks like, what the water looks like. So on a physical map, you're not really looking as much for political boundaries like where's Indiana and where's Illinois. You're looking at things like mountain ranges, rivers and lakes, desert areas, swampy areas, or maybe the plains, the high plains, or the plateaus, things like that. Those are all terms that we're going to be using and reviewing here in the next few days. So we're going to show you real quick a little modeling of how to fill out a physical map so you'll know how to do it when you have to do it for your assignments. Warning, modeling content ahead. Warning, warning. Okay, so I'm going to model for you what's kind of expected of you on some of your first assignments of the year here, some mapping assignments. Your mapping assignments, your first ones are going to involve the whole Earth, the continents and the globe, and of the globe and the oceans and all of that. And then you're going to focus on Western Europe on your first assignments. But I'm going to model a different non-example here of the United States, and you may be doing one like this coming up soon too. This spoiler alert. But I got a blank outline map from my teacher. Here, it really isn't any kind of map other than just an outline map. I don't know whether I'm supposed to look at this and label the states or do something else. So I'm going to have to, I could turn this into a political map and label all the states, maybe put some state capitals in there and stuff like that. Or I could turn it into a physical map and put in the geographic features. So I'm going to have to look at the directions to find out what my teacher wants from me. And what I got for directions, it says label and color, and then gives me a list. Great Lakes, Mississippi River, Ohio River, Gulf of Mexico, Atlantic Ocean, Pacific Ocean, Rocky Mountains, Appalachian Mountains. Two parts to this simple instruction here. It says label, that means I write in the name somewhere, and color. So I'm having to do two different things here. Need to make sure I think this through. So when I look at this list, I see really the majority of it is water. What color is water when you look at it from afar? It looks blue. So I'm going to choose blue to color in my water, and I'm going to label it after I've colored it in. And the other two things are mountains. We'll get to that in a minute. So when I looked at my blue colored pencil, I chose one that looked the most like water to me, and I ended up coloring in all the water over here as I used my resource map. When I Googled it, I looked up physical map of the United States. I see the ocean over here. I see this was the Gulf of Mexico. I see out here along the west coast out here was another ocean called the Pacific Ocean. And then I looked up these Great Lakes. I kind of knew where the Great Lakes were, but they were up here. There were 5 of them. I remember somewhere back in elementary school, my teacher taught me about homes. So that was a way to remember there were 5 lakes and kind of what each lake started with. So I colored my water in first, and then I colored my rivers. I needed the Mississippi River and the Ohio River. So I traced the rivers as I looked up on my resource map. I found out that the Ohio River runs and forms the southern border of Ohio and Indiana. Hey, I live there. So I traced that in blue to the place where the Ohio River flows into another river, which just happens to be the other river I need, which is the Mississippi. So I looked up on my resource map and I saw that the Mississippi River started way up here in Minnesota, and I flowed it all the way down the length of it and emptied it out here into the Gulf of Mexico. So I went and I labeled all my water. The Atlantic Ocean on the east coast. I hope you know that. If you don't, learn it. The Gulf of Mexico is just an extension of the Atlantic Ocean into this big gulf. I've been there many times vacationing. Maybe some of you have too, along the coast of Florida, maybe Alabama. And out here, the Pacific Ocean, which forms the west coast of the United States. California, Portland, Oregon out here. Portland is a place where we've seen a lot of issues with the Black Lives Matter protests and all that. And then Washington, the state of Washington. So that was my water. Then I also had land features. I had the Rocky Mountains and the Appalachian Mountains. So I'd heard of those, but I wasn't sure where they were. I'm lying, I knew, but I'm modeling here, shut up. Rocky Mountains are out west. They're the highest mountains in the nation. And the Appalachian Mountains are closer to home over here on the east. So rather than draw a bunch of squiggly lines trying to look and show exactly where the mountains were, I decided to color in mountainous regions. So I kind of made a circle of the area where my resource map showed me where the Rocky Mountains were. So I made this circle, that's not a circle, but an area that I encircled, and then I colored it in with brown. And I did the same for the Appalachian Mountains out here, which go from up in Maine all the way down into northern Georgia. And I made that little loop, and then I colored inside that loop. So then I labeled the Rocky Mountains and the Appalachian Mountains. So everything on here, I think I checked off and double checked it, made sure that I have it labeled and colored, and I got them all, and they're all labeled and colored, and I think I should do well with this assignment. So I'm going to take a picture of it with my iPad or phone, and I'm going to submit that photo into the Canvas assignment, and that's the way my teacher will take a look at it and give me the 100% for a job well done that I deserve. And that is what you're going to do with your world, continents, and oceans map. And then you're going to do a political map where you're going to label the countries of Western Europe. You don't have to put in all the mountains and stuff like that. You're just going to label the countries. So that's what your 2 assignments will be. If you have any questions, contact your teacher, and they'll be fabulously happy to help you out.